What's cooking, folks? Vermillion Phoenix here, and today I'm here to talk to you about the swinging mace and my preferred parts. Now, the swinging mace trap itself, to me, is absolutely amazing. It is one of the traps that I have championed since I basically started playing this game, because it has so many good strengths. It has a 5-second refire rate, which is one of the highest in the game. It's right up there with the Spitfire and the Arrow Wall as just being a very, very high refire rate trap. The base physical damage of 250 is super high. It's not quite up there with the Quarter Pounder, but you hit enemies in 3 spaces at a time, making it one of the most efficient trap capacity and activation area traps in the game overall. But it does make it a little wonky to actually place it due to its trap size. And for the cost, there's really very little comparison to make. You get a lot of damage covering a lot of area, and it is absolutely worth it. So let's take a look at the parts. Now, the debilitation resonator is, for me, super important because I play with a lot of physical heroes. At the moment, you guys may be watching me go through the game with Temper, but even before that, I've played with heroes that tend to deal a lot of the damage through physical damage, and one of the ways to increase their damage is through physical armor reduction. So the debilitation resonator, if you don't have an ability that will automatically decrease enemies' armor, which not all physical characters have, then it's going to be one of the best ways to give you a damage buff, as well as increasing the damage of any physical damage dealing trap, including traps that you may have the resonator on. Now, this is not going to actually have a buff that lasts long enough to have this trigger twice, even with an ability that causes the trap to trigger rapidly, such as Kinetic Pulse or Cygnus's Pylon activation. You're not going to be able to get this to hit enemies fast enough to take advantage of that buff. So it's really an add-on thing for other traps that you may be using. Now, the thing is, you can use this with other traps that have the ability to add the debilitation buff to, or debuff to enemies, and then the swinging mace can take advantage of it. So debilitation resonators are something that you kind of want to spread around all of your damage dealing traps if they're physical, and use them at once. That said, if you're not looking to use a physical hero, or you don't need this particular buff for whatever reason, such as you're not using a specifically physical setup, I'd recommend a control resonator in there instead, and you'll get very similar results. I tend to use a lot of slows around this particular trap, and because of that, controlled resonators will wind up being just about as useful, if not slightly more in this case, because they will always be increasing the damage of this trap rather than some of the other ones, which may do less damage. Now, the double spring for me is very useful because this is a very powerful trap on its own, and having it activate quicker, having this activate quicker is very powerful, especially when you have large groups of enemies slowed underneath it, because you can hit multiple enemies, everybody that's within the area, when the mace head swings. And usually with slows added underneath the mace, you can hit the same enemies twice. So the faster you can get the swinging, the more damage you'll get done. To offset the additional cost for the double spring, we have a stamped parts in here. Now, you don't need to have a stamped part specifically, but stamped parts and subsidized parts for me are the only parts that really make a lot of sense here. This is already a relatively expensive trap, and vanity parts don't really make a lot of sense here. Just because if you're using vanity parts for the experience, there are traps that you can use for better effect. And because you're already using slows with this, or at least you should be, in my opinion, you can place vanity parts in tar traps, and because of the amount of enemies that will be walking over them and the amount of tar traps that I generally place whenever I'm using them, that's basically a better place for it. But this will also negate the cost increase of the double spring and leave this at its flat original cost. So you get all of the speed benefits, you get your bonus damage from whatever your resonator is, and no adjustments to the price. So this is swinging mace setup that I usually like, and basically what you'll see every time that I'm using it from now on. Let me know what you guys think of the swinging mace. Are there any parts besides the controlled resonator that you particularly like in it? Is there anything that, like, do you have any problems with the trap itself? I know that there are some issues placing it in certain areas, like in the temple graveyard, because the game seeks to place traps based on their centers rather than just checking, like, you know, edge to edge to see if something can fit in any particular place, and that makes it sort of wonky sometimes. But yeah, I just personally think it's one of the better traps in the game overall. But you know, as always, let me know what you guys think in the comments, and yeah, we'll be talking about another trap shortly. Either way, thanks as always for tuning in, and until next time, as always, have a good one, folks.